My wife treated me like a dead body in our own bed 3 years. I chose divorce, exposed the bedroom neglect, and forced her family to hear my story. The morning I filed for divorce, my wife was still lying in bed like a corpse, same position she'd been in for the past 3 years. Every time I tried to touch her, arms crossed, eyes closed, waiting for it to be over. That's when I knew our marriage was already dead. I just hadn't buried it yet. Let me take you back to how it all started falling apart. It wasn't always like this. The first 2 years of our marriage, we had something real. She'd light up when I walked through the door. We'd laugh until our stomachs hurt. In the bedroom, well, that was alive too. But somewhere along the way, I became an inconvenience in her life instead of the man she married. The shift happened so gradually I almost didn't notice it. First, it was just being tired after work, then headaches, then stress from her job, always something, always an excuse. But I kept trying because I thought marriages went through rough patches. The night before I walked into that lawyer's office, I made one last attempt. We'd been married for 5 years, and I couldn't remember the last time she'd actually looked at me during intimacy, really looked at me, not that blank stare at the ceiling like she was calculating her grocery list. I reached for her that night hoping maybe something would be different. She didn't push me away, which I took as a good sign. But the moment I touched her, she went rigid. Every muscle in her body screamed rejection. But she didn't say no. She just lay there, completely motionless, like she was doing me some kind of favor. I stopped right there in the middle of everything. "What's wrong?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She opened her eyes for the first time in months during one of these moments. "Nothing's wrong. Just finish, like I was some kind of chore she needed to get through, like I was the dishwasher cycle that needed to run its course. That's when something inside me snapped, not anger, not frustration, something deeper. A cold realization that I'd been living with a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obligation. I got up, got dressed, and spent the rest of the night in the living room thinking about every interaction we'd had over the past year, every conversation that felt forced. Every time she'd scroll through her phone while I was talking, every time she'd find an excuse to avoid being in the same room as me. The woman I married had become a ghost, and I was the only one still trying to have a conversation with her. By morning, I made my decision. I wasn't going to spend another day begging for scraps of affection from someone who clearly didn't want to give them. I wasn't going to keep pretending this was normal or that things would get better if I just tried harder. When she finally came downstairs that morning, I was already dressed and ready to leave. "Where are you going so early?" she asked, barely looking up from her phone. "To bury our marriage," I said. She laughed, actually laughed. Very dramatic. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm filing for divorce today." The phone slipped from her hands. For the first time in years, I had her complete attention. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. Just like you've been in our bed for the past 3 years." She tried to stutter some response, but I was already walking toward the door. I'd wasted enough time talking to someone who'd stopped listening long ago. The drive to the lawyer's office was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. No more walking on eggshells. No more wondering what I'd done wrong. No more accepting crumbs when I deserved a full meal. My wife had treated our marriage like a business transaction, and I was about to close the deal permanently. The lawyer's office was everything I expected, sterile, professional, and exactly what my marriage had become. While I sat there signing papers, I couldn't help but think about all the warning signs I'd ignored. The truth is, I'd been making excuses for her behavior for months before that final night. Every time she'd roll over and pretend to be asleep when I came to bed. Every time she'd find a reason to stay up late so I'd already be sleeping when she finally came upstairs. It started with small things. She'd flinch when I tried to hold her hand during movies, cut conversations short when I tried to talk about our future, schedule girls' nights every weekend, leaving me alone more often than not. But the bedroom situation was where it became crystal clear that I wasn't her husband anymore. I was just some guy she happened to live with who occasionally needed attention. The few times she'd actually participate, it felt like she was checking items off a to-do list. Kiss for 30 seconds, check. Let him touch you for 5 minutes, check. Lay there until he's done, check. Roll over and go to sleep, check. No passion, no connection, no eye contact, just mechanical movements, and the occasional fake sound to hurry things along. I remember one night about 6 months before the divorce papers, I actually asked her if she was attracted to me anymore. You know what she said? "Of course I am. Don't be ridiculous." But her actions told a completely different story. She'd change clothes with her back to me. She'd shower alone every single time. She'd find reasons to avoid any physical contact throughout the day. The worst part wasn't the rejection itself. It was the way she'd act like everything was perfectly normal while treating me like I had some kind of disease she might catch. I'd cook dinner. She'd barely acknowledge it. I'd try to plan date nights. She'd find excuses to cancel. I'd suggest weekend trips. She'd suddenly remember commitments with friends. Looking back, I had become the most unimportant person in her life, while she remained the center of mine. That's a dangerous game to play with someone who knows his worth. The lawyer asked me if I wanted to pursue counseling first. I laughed. You can't counsel someone back into loving you. You can't negotiate attraction. You can't bargain your way into being desired by someone who clearly doesn't want you. 3 years of being treated like a roommate with benefits she didn't want to give had taught me everything I needed to know about where I stood. While I was sitting there, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "We need to talk when you get home. This is crazy." Crazy. That's what she called my decision to stop accepting scraps. That's what she called my choice to demand basic respect and affection from my own wife. I turned off my phone and focused on the paperwork. The lawyer explained the process, the timeline, the division of assets, all business, no emotion, just like my marriage had become. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was ending my marriage in the same cold, mechanical way my wife had been treating it for years. But unlike her, I had a good reason. When I left that office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: control. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not what I hoped she might eventually want. The drive home was interesting. Part of me wondered if she'd actually fight for us now that she realized I was serious. But a bigger part of me knew better. Someone who'd spent 3 years treating you like a burden doesn't suddenly become passionate about keeping you around. I'd given her countless opportunities to show me that I mattered. Instead, she'd shown me exactly where I ranked in her priorities, dead last. Now it was time to show her what losing someone who actually cared looked like, not through begging or dramatic gestures, but through the simple act of removing myself from her life completely. The woman who'd been acting dead in our bed was about to find out what actual death felt like when someone who loved her finally stopped trying to bring her back to life. Walking back into that house felt like entering a crime scene. The scene where my marriage had been murdered slowly over 3 years. But what I discovered that afternoon made me realize I'd been living with a complete stranger. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in, phone in hand as usual. But this time, something was different. She was actually animated, laughing at something on her screen, real laughter, the kind I hadn't heard directed at anything I'd said in months. "So," she said without looking up, "are you done with your little tantrum?" Little tantrum? That's what she called me, finally standing up for myself. "I'm done with a lot of things," I said, sitting down across from her, "but tantrums aren't one of them." She finally looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years: genuine emotion. Unfortunately, it was annoyance. You can't just file for divorce without talking to me first. That's not how marriage works, really. Because for the past 3 years, you've been showing me exactly how marriage doesn't work. She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. So what? We're going through a rough patch. Every couple does." A rough patch is a few bad months. 3 years of being treated like a roommate you barely tolerate isn't a rough patch. That's a lifestyle choice. Her phone buzzed, and I watched her eyes immediately dart to it. Even during the most important conversation of our marriage, she couldn't give me her full attention. "Are you going to answer that?" I asked. "It's not important." But I saw the smile that flickered across her face when she read whatever message had just come through, the same smile that used to be reserved for me. "Oh, who is it?" "Just a friend." "What friend makes you smile like that?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Like what?" "Like you're actually happy for the first time in months." That's when I saw it, the slight panic in her eyes, the way she clutched her phone a little tighter. "You know what? I think I deserve to see what kind of conversations make my wife happier than talking to her own husband." "You're being ridiculous." "Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you save all your good energy for everyone except me." She stood up, phone still in her hand. "I'm not doing this with you. You're not doing anything with me. That's the problem." As she walked toward the stairs, her phone buzzed again. This time, she couldn't help herself. She looked at it and smiled, actually smiled. I'd seen enough. "Stop." Something in my voice made her freeze. "Turn around." She did. And for the first time in years, I saw actual fear in her eyes, not fear of me, but fear of being caught. "You want to know what's really crazy?" I said, standing up. It's not that you don't want me anymore. It's that you clearly want someone else, but you're too much of a coward to admit it. That's not true. Then show me your phone. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. I thought so. You don't understand. It's not what you think. What I think is that you've been emotionally checked out of this marriage for years while keeping me around as backup. What I think is that you've been treating me like garbage while giving your best self to someone else. Her phone buzzed again. This time she didn't look at it, but I could see her struggling not to. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to be honest with me for the first time in years, or you're going to sign those divorce papers without another word. I never cheated on you. I didn't say you did, but you've been cheating this marriage out of everything it deserved. You've been giving your attention, your energy, your actual personality to other people while treating me like I'm some kind of burden you have to carry. Another buzz. This time she couldn't help herself. She glanced at the screen, and that little smile started to creep back. You know what? Keep it. Keep your phone. Keep your secret conversations. Keep whatever fantasy you're living in. But you're going to do it without me. Where are you going to pack? You can have the house, the couch, and all the space you need to text whoever makes you actually happy. But you can't have me pretending this is normal anymore. You're overreacting. I'm underreacting. I should have done this the first time you made me feel like wanting my own wife was asking too much. As I headed upstairs, I heard her phone buzz again. And despite everything, despite the fact that our marriage was ending, I heard her laugh. That laugh confirmed everything I needed to know. She had plenty of life left in her. She just hadn't been willing to share any of it with me. I was halfway through packing when she finally came upstairs, no phone in her hand this time, which told me she'd finally grasped the severity of the situation. You're really going to throw away 5 years of marriage over this? I stopped folding clothes and looked at her. I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. I made mistakes, okay? But this is fixable mistakes. I had to laugh. You think 3 years of treating me like I'm invisible was a mistake? I've been going through things. Work stress, family stuff. I know I haven't been the best wife lately. Lately? Try since Obama was president. She actually flinched at that. Good. Maybe now she was starting to understand the timeline of her negligence. I can change. We can go to counseling. We can work this out. Change into what? The person you were before you decided I wasn't worth your time. The person you are with everyone else except me? That's not fair. Fair. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you telling me you weren't happy instead of making me feel like a pervert for wanting to touch my own wife. Fair would have been you ending this marriage instead of letting me waste 3 years trying to fix something you'd already broken. She sat down on the bed, and for a moment I thought she might actually cry, but even her tears felt calculated. I do love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of being married. You love having someone to pay half the bills and mow the lawn. You love having a backup plan, but you don't love me. How can you say that? Because someone who loves you doesn't make you feel like you're bothering them every time you walk in the room. Someone who loves you doesn't treat intimacy like a chore they have to suffer through. Someone who loves you doesn't light up for random people on their phone while barely acknowledging your existence. I told you, that's just friends. Friends who get more genuine emotion from you in a text message than I've gotten in person in months. I zipped up my bag and turned to face her fully. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop pretending this is salvageable. You're going to stop acting like I'm the crazy one for wanting basic respect from my wife. And you're going to sign those papers without making this harder than it needs to be. And if I don't, then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why this marriage ended. Your family, my family, our friends. I'll tell them about the dead bedroom, the emotional neglect, the way you've been treating me like a roommate you can't stand. The panic in her eyes was immediate. You wouldn't do that. Try me. I've got nothing left to lose. You made sure of that. That's cruel. Cruel is what you've been doing to me for 3 years. This is just honest. She stood up, trying to regain some control of the situation. Fine. Maybe I haven't been perfect. Maybe I've been distant. But you haven't exactly been husband of the year either. There it is. I was wondering when you'd try to flip this around. I'm not flipping anything. I'm just saying relationships are a two-way street. You're absolutely right. And for 3 years, I've been the only one driving while you've been a passenger with your face buried in your phone. That's not true. When's the last time you initiated a conversation with me? When's the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When's the last time you touched me without me having to ask first? The silence stretched between us. I thought so. Maybe if you were more romantic, more spontaneous. Stop. Just stop, right there. Don't you dare try to make this about me not being good enough. I've been good enough for everyone else in my life, my job, my friends, my family. The only person who decided I wasn't good enough was you. I never said you weren't good enough. You didn't have to say it. You showed me every single day for 3 years. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. This conversation is over. You can either sign the papers like an adult or you can drag this out and make it ugly. But either way, this marriage is done. Where are you going to go? Somewhere I'm actually wanted. As I walked down the stairs, I heard her call after me. You're making a huge mistake. I stopped at the front door and looked back. The only mistake I made was staying this long. The door closed behind me with a finality that felt like freedom. The hotel room was quiet, actually quiet, not the suffocating silence of a house where someone pretends you don't exist. I'd been there for 2 days when my phone started buzzing with calls from her family. First her mother, then her sister, then her best friend, all of them wanting to know what happened, why I was being so unreasonable, why I couldn't just work things out. That's when I realized she'd been spinning the story, making herself the victim, telling everyone I'd just randomly decided to end our marriage without warning. So I decided to set the record straight. I started with her mother, who'd always liked me but was clearly getting a filtered version of events. I need you to understand something, I told her. I didn't leave because of one fight or one bad day. I left because your daughter has been treating me like a stranger for 3 years. But she says you never talked to her about any problems. I talked to her constantly. She just wasn't listening. Hard to have a conversation with someone who's more interested in their phone than their husband. I could hear the doubt creeping into her voice. Maybe you just need to give it more time. Time for what? Time for her to continue ignoring me? Time for her to keep treating intimacy like a favor she's doing for me? Time for her to finally decide I'm worth her attention? The conversation got uncomfortable fast. Good. Uncomfortable was honest. Her sister called next, more aggressive than her mother. You're really going to destroy her life over some midlife crisis? I'm not destroying anything, I'm just refusing to pretend a dead marriage is alive. Every marriage has rough patches. This wasn't a rough patch. This was 3 years of me being treated like an inconvenience in my own home. She loves you. No, she doesn't. Someone who loves you doesn't make you feel like you're bothering them every time you try to connect. Someone who loves you doesn't treat you like a roommate they can barely tolerate. By the 3rd day, word had gotten around. Our mutual friends started reaching out, and the story I was hearing from them was very different from the reality I'd been living. According to her version, I'd had some kind of breakdown. I'd become demanding and unreasonable. I'd filed for divorce out of nowhere without any attempt at communication, so I started telling my side. She's been emotionally checked out for years, I explained to one friend who called asking if I was okay. The bedroom was dead, conversations were forced, and she acted like being married to me was some kind of burden she had to carry. That doesn't sound like her. It doesn't sound like the her you see in public. But that's exactly the her I've been living with. Word traveled fast. Within a week, people who knew us both started asking questions. They started noticing things they'd overlooked before, how she'd barely acknowledge me at parties, how she'd spend entire dinners out scrolling through her phone, how she'd light up talking to other people while treating me like background noise. The narrative started shifting. Then came the voicemails, long, rambling messages where she alternated between anger and desperation. You're ruining everything over nothing. We can fix this. Why are you telling people our personal business? Because our personal business had become my personal hell. And I was done protecting her reputation while she destroyed my self-worth. You're making me look like a terrible wife. She was a terrible wife. I was just finally admitting it out loud. By the end of that week, even her own family started asking her harder questions. Her mother called me back. I talked to her again. She admitted things haven't been good between you two. That's progress. But she says she's willing to change. She's had 3 years to change. The only thing that made her willing was the divorce papers. Don't you think she deserves a chance? I gave her 1,000 chances. Every morning I woke up hoping things would be different. Every night I went to bed disappointed. I'm done hoping. The final call came from her sister, but this time the tone was different. She told me about the phone thing, about how she's been distant. Distant is a nice way of putting it. She says she didn't realize how bad things had gotten. She didn't realize, or she didn't care. Long pause. Maybe both. That's the most honest thing anyone in your family has said to me all week. She's panicking now. She knows she messed up. Good. Maybe now she'll understand what the last 3 years felt like for me. The truth was out. The real story was being told. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the unreasonable one. I wasn't the one destroying a good marriage. I was just the one who finally stopped accepting scraps and demanded a full meal. And apparently, that was too much to ask from my own wife. Divorce papers arrived at her door on a Thursday. I know because she called me 17 times that day. I answered exactly 0 of those calls. By Friday morning, she was standing in my hotel lobby. The desk clerk called up to ask if I wanted to see her. I told him to let her know I was busy, which I was. I was busy moving on with my life. She waited 4 hours in that lobby, 4 hours of finally understanding what it felt like to be ignored by someone who was supposed to care about you. When I finally came down, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Good. Maybe now she knew how exhausting it was to fight for someone's attention. We need to talk. No, we needed to talk 3 years ago. Now we need to sign papers. I made mistakes. I know that now. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices every day for 3 years. You chose to treat me like I didn't matter. I can change. You had your chance to change. You had 1,000 chances. The only reason you want to change now is because you're facing consequences for the first time. She tried to step closer, but I held my ground. I love you. No, you love the convenience of me. You love having someone to split bills with, someone to do the things you don't want to do, someone to keep around just in case your other options don't work out. That's not true. Then why did it take divorce papers for you to realize you wanted to save this marriage? Why did it take me leaving for you to suddenly remember you love me? She couldn't answer that, because we both knew the truth. I've been going to therapy, she said finally. Good for you. Work on yourself. Figure out why you thought treating your husband like garbage was acceptable. But do it without me. The therapist says we can work through this. The therapist is getting paid to give you hope. I'm not getting paid to pretend this is fixable. Her voice cracked. Please, I'll do anything. There's nothing to do. You already showed me who you are when things got comfortable. You showed me that love and respect are conditional for you. You showed me that I'm only valuable when you're afraid of losing me. That's not fair. Fair would have been you treating me with basic decency when you thought I'd stick around forever. Fair would have been you caring about my feelings before lawyers got involved. She pulled out her phone, which almost made me laugh. Even during our final conversation, that thing was still attached to her hand. Look, I deleted the apps. I cut contact with everyone you were worried about. I was never worried about them. I was worried about the fact that you were more interested in talking to strangers online than your own husband. I know I messed up. You didn't mess up. You checked out for 3 years. You lived like a single woman who happened to share space with a roommate she couldn't stand. I want to fix this. You can't fix 3 years of emotional neglect with a few therapy sessions and some deleted apps. You can't unfeel the loneliness you put me through. You can't undo the nights I went to bed feeling like I was married to a stranger. The lobby was getting crowded and people were starting to notice our conversation. She was crying now, but even her tears felt too late. I'm begging you. Don't beg. It's embarrassing for both of us. What do you want me to do? I want you to sign the papers. I want you to let me go find someone who actually wants to be with me. I want you to learn from this so you don't destroy your next relationship the same way. There won't be a next relationship. There will be. And maybe you'll treat him better than you treated me. Maybe you'll remember that ignoring someone you're supposed to love is cruel. Maybe you'll realize that marriage requires more than just showing up. I pulled out my copy of the signed papers. I've already signed my half. Your lawyer has everything you need. That's it? 5 years of marriage, and you're just walking away? I walked away the day you decided I wasn't worth your attention anymore. This is just making it official. As I headed toward the elevator, she called after me one last time. You'll regret this. I turned back to look at her. The only thing I regret is staying as long as I did. The elevator doors closed, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely free from begging for scraps of affection, free from pretending that being ignored was normal, free from convincing myself that someday she'd remember how to love me. She'd spent 3 years teaching me that I wasn't enough for her. Now I was going to spend the rest of my life proving that she wasn't enough for me either. The woman who acted dead in our bed had finally gotten exactly what she'd been working toward all along. A marriage that was completely, permanently dead and buried.